Dear students of 8A and 8B, today in uh, in this class I shall introduce a new lesson number 4, the Union Executive. Lesson number 4, the United Nations. Lesson number 4, United Nations. United Nations. First point, source. Second, importance. Third, establishment. 4, aims. And 5, role of the leading countries. Role of the leading countries. Leading countries. Role of the leading countries. First point, source. The United Nations was established in order to avoid further war in future. Now, what are the source of it? You know, during the First World War, the League of Nations was established. But the League failed to fulfill its aims and objectives. Why? Because the League's members were not active. The League's members did not cooperate with the aims and objectives of the League. That's why the League of Nations failed to check another world war. As a result, the Second World War was taken place. You know, during Second World War, or on the eve of the Second World War, when the Second World War was going to be started, and Germany and Italy were forced to take revenge against the Treaty of Versailles because the treaty was insulting for them. The concept of Nazism in Germany under Hitler, and the concept of fascism under the leadership of Mussolini in Italy gave a birth of discontentment among the people of not only Italy and Germany respectively, but also the leaders, world leaders like Germany and Italy. At the same time, from Asian country, Japan was determined to glorify her image. How? Because the number of colonies which were established by America, France, England, Russia. Now Germany decided to establish so many colonies throughout Asia, Europe and Africa, especially in Far East. So Japan did it with a view to establish a government in Manchuria. Manchuria, a part of China, suddenly it was occupied by Japan. But China appealed to the League to make her stop doing it, and other leading countries of Europe like France, England, they adapted a policy of appeasement. So Japan decided it was a golden opportunity for him to avail. How? By ignoring the objections of other countries, and by invading the weak countries of the world, and establishing colonies over there. That's why Japan left the League in the year 1933. Whenever Japan left the League, Germany and Italy encouraged Japan a lot. And in the meantime, Japan occupied the properties of America and England in China, and also extended her territories towards various parts of Far East. But the leading countries of Europe, they did not take any action, any legal action against Japan. Ultimately, Japan formed the Axis group, Berlin, Rome, Tokyo Axis, against the Allied powers. It is due to that reason, my dear student, the Second World War started. And whenever the Second World War started in the year in the year 1939 and continued till 1945, the world leaders realized that the role of the League of Nations, which was established after the First World War, the League of Nations, which was established after the First World War, in order to stop another world war, because the First World War damaged huge properties, wealth, and destroyed so many cities and its economy. That's why the world leaders established the League of Nations after the First World War, during the Second World War, with a view to check another world war. But still, League could not check it. On the contrary, Japan became aggressive, ferocious, and became a cause of political tension throughout the world. And ultimately, the world leaders decided to set up another international political organization named the United Nations. This is the source of the United Nations, my dear students. The next one, importance. The United Nations is very important than the previous one. Why? Because in previous international organization, the member countries did not cooperate with it. But this time, the member countries were determined to cooperate with the functions and objectives of the United Nations. The three leading countries, England, America, and Russia, played an important role in establishing the United Nations. They made all the member countries understand that the role of the League of Nations is very important in solving international crises, international problems, and tensions. In that case, the role of the member countries would be more and more active. Otherwise, the entire system of the United Nations would be an utter failure. So, in order to avoid this type of inconveniences, this time the world leaders, especially England and America, both of the two countries decided to be active towards the aims and objectives of the United Nations. And ultimately, United Nations became acceptable. United Nations program also were acceptable to the world leaders and other member countries. Now, it is due to that reason the establishment of the United Nations also occurred. By the end of the Second World War, in the year 1945, the United Nations Organization was established. The United Nations Organization was established with a view to stop the possibilities of another world war and remove international tension, remove all kinds of political crises throughout the world, and set up an image of a tension-free world. And it decided to establish international understanding, brotherhood, international cooperation, and fundamental liberties of the people. It ensures brotherhood, like that. So this was done. All these aims and objectives were framed at the time when it was established. Now, the other aims and objectives of the United Nations. Other aims and objectives of the United Nations. what are the other aims and objectives of the United Nations? Now I am going to discuss about it. The other aims and objectives of the United Nations. Number one, which is due to the United Nations aims and objectives, the United Nations and objectives had become acceptable to the member countries and other countries of the world, and some important, according to the Charter Act, there are certain aims and objectives of the United Nations. Number one, to maintain international peace and security, and to develop friendly relations among the nations, and based on equal rights and self-determination of people. And next point, to cooperate in solving international problems of economic, social, and cultural or humanitarian character, to promote social progress and better standards of life. That means in each sphere of life, the United Nations should work steadily with a view to establish international understanding, international cooperation among the states, and at the same time, it will this United Nations, this organization would promote brotherhood, friendly cooperation, and would remove political crisis, political problems, and misunderstanding, and would settle all kinds of controversial issues and international crises. Next point, promote and encourage respect for human rights and fundamental freedom for all. Each citizen of each country of the world should have fundamental freedom, fundamental rights, but it should be its first and foremost duty to promote and encourage and respect for human rights and fundamental rights of the citizens of each and every country of the world. Next point, be the center for harmonizing the actions of nations in attaining these common ends. Another point is that in order to solve all types of problems of the nation states and nation state, it would work effectively, it would work actively, and by treating all the countries equally, without adopting the policy of humiliation and policy of inequality. The policy of equality should be taken in solving international crises, international problems, and in solving and in ending international political tension. Now, organs of the UN. Role of the leading countries. Some leading countries are there whose role also is very praiseworthy, like United States of America and its President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and England and its President, its Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and United Soviet Socialist Republic and its premier, Joseph Stalin. These three important countries of the world, the leading countries of the world, then unanimously reached a place, and reaching there, they set up this organization, the United Nations Organization. And in the year 1941, although the United Nations Organization was set up in the year 1945, yet its charter was framed in the year 1941, when the Second World War was going on. During that time, its charter was framed by the world leaders in the year 1941. And according to that Charter Act, which was framed by the world leaders, the United Nations was established in the year 1945. Now, the world leaders openly declared that the active participations of the members of the United Nations should be more and more effective, should be more and more active. Otherwise, the entire system of the United Nations would be nip in the bud. In order to avoid these kind of things, the world leaders decided to be cooperative towards the programs, towards the aims, towards the objectives of the United Nations. Since the League of Nations failed to achieve its success, to reach its goal because of the non-cooperative attitude of its member countries, the world leaders, being members of the United Nations, decided to be united regarding the international crisis, regarding solving the problems of the world by way of extending their cooperation towards the United Nations strongly, so that the aims and objectives of the United Nations must be successful, and these political world organizations can work steadily with a view to establish international peace, with a view to solving international political international crisis in order to settle disputes of the world peacefully, and must check the another world war, the horrors of another world war. Thank you up to this.